So, I don't know if you've been paying attention this last month or so, but Activision Blizzard is in a lot of they're in a lot of trouble. A lot of trouble, even by their standards. Even if we put the amount of trouble they're in on the Blizzard curve, right? This still is some deep poo. Bobby Kotick, the CEO of Blizzard, he got subpoenaed the other day. That's great. Claire Hart, the chief legal officer for Blizzard Entertainment, yeah, she resigned. The Overwatch 2 executive producer, he's leaving Blizzard. The SEC is investigating Activision Blizzard over all the sexual harassment allegations and all the lawsuits. Look, it is a mess over at Blizzard. And you know what? Cry me a river. The only thing I feel bad for are the women who work there, who apparently were treated horrifically by higher-ups in the company. That sounds like that's the kind of heinous crap that should be grabbing our attention. It reminds us of why whenever feminists and lefty types try and cry wolf about stuff like this, it takes away from the really bad stuff that can happen like this, right? Won't get too sidetracked, though. The main point of this is that, did you guys know, because I didn't know this until this story started coming out about a month ago, but Jesse McCree, the Overwatch cowboy character, did you know that he was named after a real person? A Blizzard employee who had been there for many years. I bet you probably didn't know that. At least I didn't. I bet a lot of people are only discovering it because of all this news coming out. Streisand effect much. Now, the real Jesse McCree, he's been there for a while. He's a Diablo 4 level designer, I believe. He'd been in the company for quite some time. He was let go from the studio after all the sexual harassment and the discrimination lawsuits and all that horrendous stuff started to come to light, and he had a level of involvement in it based off of a text message that was sent. Do I think that this warrants the name change of the character in and of itself? I don't know. Probably because there's a great amount of uncertainty as to what his involvement was, but he was aware of all this stuff going on to some degree, and maybe that is bad enough that he knew about it and nothing was done. In fact, I'd say that's pretty heinous. But it's not really the topic that I wanted to get onto. The topic I wanted to get onto is adjacent to that, which is that because of the real-life Jesse McCree's involvement in these sorts of things at Activision Blizzard, they decided to rename the character Jesse McCree, the cowboy in Overwatch. And that is an interesting thing. It's interesting because it prompts a number of discussions, like, should you be naming characters after real-life people? I think that's obviously a judgment call. And I think that you can absolutely name characters after real people and do it in a respectful way to honor that person and their achievements and maybe their involvement in companies. However, much like in this Blizzard situation, somebody can, well, as years go by, maybe some of these people who you thought honorable and you wanted to respect, maybe they say something bad or they do something bad, which is far, far worse. And now what? Now you're stuck with a fictional character of prominence, which is often why you don't have video game characters who are this important and in the front line, you could say, of a game being named and tied to a real life person. Oftentimes it'll be background characters or quest-giving NPCs that aren't so prominent for pretty obvious reasons, right? But what happens when someone as famous and well-known of a character as Jesse McCree from Overwatch has to be renamed because of his real-life namesake? Well, for starters, I think that this is ultimately this doesn't matter, all right? This doesn't matter and this doesn't change anything. And if you think this changes something, you're an easily fooled moron. You are a fool. If this makes you clap, if this makes you cheer, if this makes you think that, if you think this affects anything, you are a fool who is easily played by what I would probably say an outright evil corporation. This is a PR move that changes absolutely nothing. It is a stunt to try and help mend the image, an ultimately meaningless corporate decision that is made by the people who didn't do anything when all these sexual harassment allegations and all of these issues internally at Blizzard were happening. The bad people can't do something like this and get any amount of credit. Well, let's put it this way, right? Let's say you have a character in a game of this size who's named after a real-life person, right? What happens when they do something bad? Now, obviously, bad things that are done, they exist on a wide spectrum. Everything from calling someone a mean name on a Twitter post to mass serial killing, right? And everything in between. It's a wide spectrum of badness that a person can do. So, how bad does a person have to be before you decide you're going to rename a character? Is this going to be a principled position, or is it going to be a pragmatic one? Let me explain what I mean by that, right? If you have a low-level NPC with no speaking lines who exists as nothing more than a little nod, a little wink, a little Easter egg of a kind to those in the know, who can be easily changed in a couple text scripts, and that is that, then I would say that the ceiling for changing that name based on the behavior of the character is going to be much, much lower than someone like Jesse McCree, I would think. A lot of this obviously has to do with the amount of work and effort and damage to the internal world that might be caused by renaming a character all of a sudden for out-of-universe reasons, and not in-universe ones. Let's say if Nathan Drake, right, was named after a real person, maybe Nathan Drake had worked at Sony or PlayStation for 20 years, right, and so Nathan Drake, the character from Uncharted, was named after him. And it turns out that the real-life Nathan Drake hypothetically had, I don't know, killed his wife and set off a bomb in a school. You know, something really, 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 really terrible. Do you change the name? Because that's a big deal, to change the name of a character. You know, a decent amount of work goes into it. All of the lines that have to be fixed and the damage that it does to the internal lore of a character all of a sudden having a flat-out different name. If you remaster the games, you'll have to redo those lines. Any references to the character going forward are going to have to be redone. If it's a current work or a current piece, like maybe an MMO or some kind of a live service, then you're going to continue to have to redo lines. A lot of work can go into it. Vocally, textually, and quote-unquote culturally within the game. So I can understand the idea that you reserve these name changes of very prominent characters to when their namesakes do. They have to do something of a higher level to get that changed, right? Now what it's going to take is obviously going to depend on the people in charge and the character themselves and the things that were done. And I don't have the answer. I don't think any one of us has an answer. I don't think there is an answer. I think this is one of those case-by-case kinds of things. But it gets into this concept of, should a real-life person who is bad and does bad things, well, that's kind of redundant, but is a real bad person, do they get ownership over a name? Maybe that's the bigger, broader discussion that transcends the video game aspect of this story. How much do we allow a bad person to own that name? Jesse McCree, for instance, he's not the only person named Jesse McCree. Now, granted, I haven't checked, but I'm going to take a stab that he's not the only person named Jesse McCree. Now, I can understand why there's not a lot of people these days being named Hitler. So you're just going to let Adolf Hitler take ownership of that name, huh? Well, I think that whether or not we take a principled stance either way, it's pretty clear that in modern society, as it has been for many, many decades now, the name Hitler is, of course, and understandably, associated with, well, you already know. And maybe with that prominent association so big and common in our society right now, it's probably not a good idea to name your kid Hitler. But how bad does someone have to be? But more importantly, how common does the knowledge of that bad person have to be before you change it? If we go back to the Jesse McCree example, like I said, I bet most people had no clue that this cowboy character was named after a real person who worked at Blizzard. I didn't, and now I do know. And now I'm aware of this connection. You have created this connection where there wasn't any before. That Streisand effect, in a way. But it's like, it's not really the Streisand effect, it's more of, I don't know what... Does this need, I don't even know what this do we need to just call it the McCree effect? Maybe until someone lets me know if this is an actual thing, I'll just call it the McCree effect. Do I think that the cowboy should be renamed? No. I don't. I think that ultimately it's a meaningless gesture. I think that it's not that important. It's the last thing that you need to be concerned about when it comes to Activision Blizzard at the moment. And quite frankly, I don't think that we should give the real-life Jesse McCree that level of ownership over the name. I really don't. I think the cowboy should carry on as he is, and I don't know, I guess we simply accept the fact that the real Jesse McCree, yeah, it's likely he did some bad things. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Technically nothing's proven yet, but still. In the same way that words only have the power that you give them, right? Slurs are a good example. Maybe names are the same way. Maybe if we just didn't care about the real-life McCree anymore, maybe if we were able to differentiate between the fantasy character and the real person, this wouldn't be an issue at all. Because ultimately, this just seems to be one big attempt at trying to get good PR by the people from the company who are responsible for all the bad things anyway. And a part of me wonders, I guess to wrap this up, a part of me wonders how many people who don't play Overwatch, which is a lot of them these days, how many of those people will now play Overwatch because they renamed the cowboy? And how many people will now play the cowboy character because they changed his name? How many people were prevented from playing this game because it had him in it? I bet this is a net negative in terms of not just PR, but in getting people's attention onto, for those who didn't know about all the Blizzard lawsuits and the harassment stuff and them being sued and the SEC investigations and all that stuff, how many people didn't know about that who know it now, who will now certainly no longer play the game or will stop playing because of it? Now, well, I guess those are my thoughts. I'll see y'all later. Take care. Toodaloo. Sayonara.